Nobody wants to fail. Not once, not ever. When people imagine their future, they imagine progress. They imagine success. They imagine achievement. They imagine reaching the destination. Very few people imagine the setbacks. Very few people imagine the disappointment. Very few people imagine the day everything falls apart. And yet failure arrives anyway. It arrives uninvited, unwanted, unexpected, sometimes after months of effort, sometimes after years, sometimes when you were absolutely certain things would work out. That is what makes failure so painful. It doesn't just take away a result. It attacks a belief, the belief that your hard work would pay off, the belief that you were ready, the belief that you knew what you were doing. Failure has a way of confronting us with realities we never wanted to face. That is why it hurts. Not because failure is evil, because failure is honest, brutally honest. Success often tells us what we want to hear. Failure tells us what we need to hear. And most people are not prepared for that conversation. Think back to one of your biggest failures. Not a small mistake, not a minor setback. A real failure, the kind that kept you awake at night, the kind that made you question yourself, the kind that left a mark. You probably remember it clearly. The emotions, the disappointment, the silence, the moment you realized things were not going to work out the way you hoped. Failure creates memories that success rarely does, because pain has a way of demanding attention. Pain forces reflection. Pain forces questions. Pain forces growth. That is why failure often stays with us longer than our victories. Most people can barely remember an ordinary success, but they remember a painful failure for years, sometimes decades, because failure does something success rarely does. It gets our attention. When life is going well, people stop asking questions. They become comfortable. They assume they understand everything. They assume they have figured life out. Then failure arrives, and suddenly the questions return. What went wrong? What did I miss? What should I have done differently? What can I learn from this? Failure has a way of turning certainty into curiosity, and curiosity is where growth begins. The problem is that most people never reach that stage. They become trapped in the pain, trapped in the embarrassment, trapped in the disappointment. They see failure as a verdict, as proof that they are not good enough, not smart enough, not talented enough, not capable enough. But failure was never meant to be a verdict. It was meant to be feedback. There is a difference. A verdict ends the conversation. Feedback begins one. A verdict says you are finished. Feedback says there is more to learn. Unfortunately, many people confuse the two. They experience one failure and immediately start questioning their worth, as if a single result can define an entire human being, as if one setback has the authority to determine a future. It doesn't, and it never will. Failure can tell you that a strategy was wrong. It cannot tell you that your future is hopeless. Failure can tell you that preparation was lacking. It cannot tell you that growth is impossible. Failure can tell you what happened. It cannot tell you who you are. Yet people hand that power to failure every day. They allow one bad result to become an identity. One rejection becomes, I am not good enough. One mistake becomes, I am a failure. One setback becomes, I should stop trying. And that is where the real damage begins. Not in the failure itself, but in the meaning we attach to it. Because failure hurts twice. The first pain comes from the event. The second pain comes from the story we tell ourselves afterward. And often the second pain lasts much longer. That is why failure is one of life's most misunderstood experiences. People see the pain, but they miss the lesson. They see the loss, but they miss the wisdom. They see the disappointment, but they miss the opportunity hidden inside it. Because failure rarely arrives empty-handed. It usually brings a lesson with it. A lesson nobody wanted. A lesson nobody asked for. A lesson that can only be understood after the pain begins to fade. The tragedy is that most people spend so much energy trying to escape failure that they never stop to ask why it appeared in the first place. They want the discomfort gone, the embarrassment gone, the disappointment gone, and that's understandable. Nobody enjoys failing. But what if failure isn't the enemy? What if failure is simply the messenger? What if the thing you hate the most is carrying information you desperately need? That possibility changes everything. Because if failure is a messenger, then the question is no longer, how do I avoid failure? The question becomes, what is failure trying to teach me? And that question is where this story truly begins. Because the teacher nobody wants often teaches the lessons nobody forgets. Nobody is born afraid of failure. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall again and again and again, sometimes hundreds of times, yet they keep trying. They don't sit on the floor and declare themselves a failure. They don't question their worth. They don't compare themselves to other children. They simply get up and try again. To a child, failure is not an identity. It is part of learning. Somewhere along the way, that changes. Somewhere along the way, failure becomes something to fear, something to hide, something to avoid. And most people never stop to ask why. The answer begins much earlier than we realize. It begins in school, a place designed to teach us many things, but often teaches us one lesson unintentionally. Getting the wrong answer is bad. From an early age, we learn that success receives rewards. Good grades, praise, recognition, approval. Failure receives something different. Disappointment, correction, embarrassment, comparison, without realizing it. Many people begin associating failure with personal worth. A high score means you're smart. A low score means something is wrong. An achievement means you're valuable. A mistake means you're lacking. The lesson is subtle, but powerful. Over time, people stop seeing failure as information. They start seeing it as judgment. Then the pattern follows them into adulthood. The classroom changes, but the fear remains. People become afraid of looking foolish, afraid of being wrong, afraid of making mistakes in public, afraid of failing where others can see. Not because failure itself is unbearable, because of what they think it says about them. This is why so many people chase perfection. Not because perfection exists, because perfection feels safe. If everything is perfect, nobody can criticize you. Nobody can reject you. Nobody can point out your mistakes. Perfection becomes armor. The problem is that armor is heavy, and eventually it prevents movement. People wait until everything is perfect before they begin. The perfect plan, the perfect opportunity, the perfect timing, the perfect conditions. Meanwhile, life keeps moving. Opportunities come and go. Years pass. Dreams remain untouched. All because failure became unacceptable. The strange thing is that society celebrates success stories, but rarely tells the whole story. People admire the victory. They rarely discuss the defeats that came before it. They celebrate the achievement. They ignore the setbacks. They applaud the result. They overlook the struggle. As a result, many people develop a distorted view of success. They assume successful people moved from one victory to another. They imagine a smooth path, a straight line, a flawless journey. Reality looks nothing like that. Behind almost every achievement is a collection of mistakes, misjudgments, wrong turns, failures, lessons. The difference is that those failures rarely make headlines. Only the outcome does. And because people only see the outcome, they begin believing something dangerous. They believe failure is unusual, when in reality, failure is normal. It is one of the most common experiences on Earth. Every inventor has failed. Every athlete has failed. Every artist has failed. Every entrepreneur has failed. Every human being who has ever attempted something meaningful has failed. The difference is not whether failure happened. The difference is how it was interpreted. Some people see failure as evidence they should stop. Others see it as information they can use. One interpretation creates stagnation. The other creates growth. Yet society often rewards appearances more than learning. People would rather look successful than become successful. They would rather avoid embarrassment than gain experience. They would rather protect their image than develop their abilities. And because of that, many people spend their lives avoiding the very thing that could help them improve. Failure. Not because failure is dangerous, because their relationship with failure is unhealthy. Imagine trying to learn a language without making mistakes. Imagine trying to learn an instrument without hitting the wrong notes. Imagine trying to learn a sport without losing games. It would be impossible. Mistakes are not interruptions to learning. They are learning. They are learning. Failure is not separate from improvement. It is part of improvement. The tragedy is that many people understand this in theory, but reject it in practice. They accept that failure is necessary for everyone else, but not for themselves. When others fail, they see a lesson. When they fail, they see a disaster. That double standard creates enormous suffering because it turns every mistake into a personal attack, every setback into a crisis, every disappointment into proof of inadequacy. And when failure feels like a threat to your identity, you begin avoiding situations where failure is possible. You stop taking risks. You stop experimenting. You stop growing. Not because you lack potential, because you've been conditioned to fear the very process that creates progress. That conditioning is powerful, but it is not permanent. The moment you begin seeing failure differently, everything starts changing. The moment you stop asking, how do I avoid failure? And start asking, what can failure teach me? A new perspective begins to emerge. Because failure is not the opposite of learning. Failure is one of its greatest teachers. And the people who eventually achieve remarkable things are often not the people who failed the least. They are the people who learned the most from failure when it arrived. That lesson is uncomfortable. But then again, the most valuable lessons usually are. And that is why society's hatred of failure comes at a cost paid in missed opportunities, untested potential, and lessons that were never learned, because the teacher nobody wants is often the teacher we need most. Success is a wonderful teacher, but it is not a complete one. Success teaches confidence. Success teaches belief. Success teaches momentum. When things are going well, it is easy to trust yourself, easy to believe in your abilities, easy to feel capable. That is why people chase success. It feels good. It validates effort. It rewards hard work. It provides proof that something is working. There is nothing wrong with that. The problem is that success often hides things. And what success hides, failure reveals. This is why failure can teach lessons success never could. Imagine someone who succeeds on their first attempt. They launch a business. It works. They make money. People praise them. Opportunities arrive. Everything seems perfect. But there is a danger hidden inside early success. They may never discover which parts of their success came from skill and which parts came from luck. They may never identify their weaknesses. They may never learn how to recover from setbacks, because success covered those lessons with applause. Failure doesn't do that. Failure shines a light on everything, every weakness, every blind spot, every poor decision, every bad habit, every area that needs improvement. And while that experience is uncomfortable, it is incredibly valuable, because you cannot improve what you refuse to see. One of the first things failure teaches is humility. Success can sometimes create the illusion that we know more than we do. Failure destroys that illusion. Failure reminds us that there is always more to learn, more to understand, more to improve. Humility is not weakness. Humility is clarity. It is the ability to look at reality without being blinded by pride. And failure has a remarkable way of creating that clarity. Failure also teaches responsibility. When things go wrong, there is a temptation to blame everything else. The economy, other people, bad luck, timing, circumstances, sometimes those factors matter. But failure eventually asks a difficult question. What could you have done better? That question is powerful because it shifts attention away from excuses and toward growth. The moment you begin looking for lessons instead of villains, everything changes. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can this teach me? That shift creates progress. Another lesson success rarely teaches is patience. People love quick victories, instant results, rapid growth, but meaningful achievement usually takes longer than expected. Failure forces people to confront that reality. It teaches endurance, persistence, consistency. It teaches the ability to continue when rewards are not immediate. Success often celebrates the finish line. Failure teaches respect for the process, and the process is where mastery lives. Failure also reveals character. This may be its most important lesson of all. Anyone can feel confident when everything is working. Anyone can feel optimistic when life is going their way. The real test comes when things fall apart. What do you do then? How do you respond when the plan fails? How do you react when effort is not rewarded? How do you behave when nobody is applauding? Failure answers those questions. Failure reveals whether your commitment depends on results. Failure reveals whether your discipline survives disappointment. Failure reveals whether your values remain intact under pressure. Success can make you look strong. Failure shows whether you actually are. This is why some people become bitter after failure, and others become wiser. The event may be identical. The response is different. One person sees punishment. The other sees instruction. One person sees an ending. The other sees information. One person closes the book. The other starts reading more carefully. Failure itself does not determine the outcome. Interpretation does. The lesson hidden inside failure is often invisible at first. When emotions are high, all you can see is the loss, the disappointment, the frustration, the embarrassment. But with time, something interesting happens. The lesson becomes clearer. You begin seeing mistakes you couldn't see before, patterns you ignored, warnings you overlooked, weaknesses you denied. What once felt like destruction starts looking more like education, an expensive education, a painful education, but education nonetheless. That is why some of the wisest people are not those who succeeded the most. They are those who learned the most, and many of those lessons came through failure, not because failure is superior to success, but because failure is harder to ignore. Success often whispers. Failure demands attention. Success rewards. Failure explains. Success celebrates where you are. Failure shows you where you need to grow, and growth is often far more valuable than comfort. The truth is that most people want the wisdom that failure creates, but they do not want the experience that produces it. They want resilience without setbacks, patience without delays, humility without mistakes, strength without struggle. Life rarely works that way. Some lessons require discomfort. Some truths require disappointment. Some growth requires failure. And that is why failure remains one of life's most effective teachers. Not because it is pleasant, not because it is easy, but because it reveals things success often leaves hidden. And the lessons hidden inside failure are often the ones that change a life forever. Most people think failure changes them, but that is not entirely true. Failure does not always change who you are. Sometimes it simply reveals who you have been all along. That is what makes failure so uncomfortable. It acts like a mirror that shows things we would rather not see. When life is going well, it is easy to believe certain things about yourself. It is easy to believe you are patient, easy to believe you are disciplined, easy to believe you are committed, easy to believe you are resilient. Success creates an environment where those beliefs rarely get tested. Failure does. Failure asks questions. Success never asks. Questions that cannot be answered with words. Only actions. Are you still committed when the results disappear? Are you still disciplined when motivation leaves? Are you still patient when progress slows down? Are you still determined when nobody believes in you? Those are the questions failure asks, and the answers are often surprising. Many people discover that they were more attached to the reward than the process, more attached to recognition than improvement, more attached to the outcome than the work itself. Failure exposes these truths, not to embarrass us, to educate us. Imagine building a house on weak foundations. From the outside, everything may look perfect. The walls are strong. The paint is fresh. The structure appears impressive. Then a storm arrives. Suddenly the weaknesses become visible, not because the storm created them, because the storm revealed them. Failure works the same way. It does not always create weaknesses. It reveals weaknesses that were already there. Weak patience, weak discipline, weak preparation, weak character, weak commitment. The revelation is painful, but it is valuable because hidden weaknesses are dangerous. Visible weaknesses can be improved. This is why some failures feel so personal. They expose things we worked hard to hide. Sometimes they expose arrogance, the belief that we knew more than we actually did. Sometimes they expose complacency, the belief that effort was no longer necessary. Sometimes they expose insecurity, the fear that we were never as confident as we pretended to be. Failure strips away illusions, and illusions rarely leave quietly. They fight to survive. That is why people become defensive after failure, why they blame others, why they create excuses, why they avoid responsibility. The truth feels threatening. The mirror is showing something they do not want to see. But growth begins the moment we stop arguing with the mirror. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and seeing dirt on your face. Arguing with the mirror changes nothing. Ignoring the mirror changes nothing. Breaking the mirror changes nothing. The problem remains. Failure works the same way. It points toward reality. Reality may be uncomfortable, but reality is where improvement begins. One of the greatest gifts failure offers is self-awareness, the ability to see yourself clearly, not as you wish you were, not as others see you, but as you truly are. And that clarity is powerful, because you cannot become better while pretending everything is fine. You cannot improve weaknesses you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot solve problems you refuse to identify. Failure identifies them with remarkable precision. This is why some people emerge from failure stronger than before. Not because failure magically improved them, because failure forced honesty, and honesty created growth. The uncomfortable truth is that many people spend their lives avoiding mirrors. They surround themselves with excuses, with distractions, with explanations, anything that allows them to avoid difficult truths. Failure removes those distractions. Failure forces a confrontation, a conversation with reality, a conversation that many people postpone for years. The people who grow the most are usually the people willing to have that conversation. They ask difficult questions. What did I miss? What do I need to improve? Where was I wrong? What lesson am I refusing to see? Those questions require humility, but they also create wisdom, and wisdom is often born from honest reflection. not comfortable reflection, honest reflection. The mirror of failure does not always show pleasant things. Sometimes it reveals flaws. Sometimes it reveals mistakes. Sometimes it reveals painful truths. But it also reveals possibilities, because every weakness you identify can become a strength. Every mistake can become a lesson. Every flaw can become an area of growth. That is why failure should not be feared. Not because failure feels good, because failure tells the truth. And while the truth can be painful, it is also liberating. A lie can comfort you. The truth can change you. Failure chooses truth every single time. And that is why the teacher nobody wants often becomes the teacher nobody forgets. Because the lessons learned in front of the mirror tend to stay with us for the rest of our lives. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid failure. They avoid risks. They avoid difficult challenges. They avoid uncertainty. They avoid situations where they might lose. At first, this seems reasonable. After all, nobody enjoys failing. Nobody enjoys disappointment. Nobody enjoys rejection. So avoiding failure feels like a smart strategy. But there is a problem. Failure is not the only thing you avoid when you avoid risk. You also avoid growth. You avoid opportunities. You avoid experiences. You avoid possibilities. And eventually, you avoid the life you could have lived. This is the hidden cost that nobody talks about. The cost of avoiding failure. Because life presents two kinds of pain. The pain of failure and the pain of regret. Most people spend so much energy escaping the first that they accidentally create the second. And regret is a far heavier burden. Failure hurts, but failure ends. The disappointment fades. The lesson remains. Life moves forward. Regret is different. Regret lingers. It follows people for years, sometimes for decades, not because of what happened, because of what never happened. The business that was never started, the opportunity that was never taken, the conversation that never happened, the dream that was abandoned before it had a chance to live. Those are the things people remember, not the failures, the absences, the possibilities that were never explored. Imagine two people standing at the same crossroads. One decides to take a chance. The other decides to stay where they are. The first person fails. The second person never tries. At first glance, the second person appears to have avoided pain. But years later, something interesting happens. The person who failed has a story, a lesson, an experience, wisdom gained through action. The person who never tried has only questions, questions that can never be answered. What if? What could have happened? Who could I have become? Those questions are difficult to carry because there is no way to resolve them. Failure provides closure. Avoidance often does not. The tragedy is that many people confuse safety with security. They believe staying where they are protects them, but nothing remains unchanged forever. Time moves forward. Opportunities expire. Circumstances shift. The future arrives whether we are prepared or not. Doing nothing is still a decision. Avoiding action is still a choice. And every choice carries consequences. Even the choice not to choose. There is a common belief that failure is the biggest threat to success. It isn't. The biggest threat is never stepping onto the field at all, because failure can teach, failure can strengthen, failure can guide, but an unlived life teaches nothing. It simply passes, one day becoming the source of countless regrets. Think about the people who inspire you, the people who built something meaningful, created something valuable, achieved something remarkable. None of them were protected from failure. They simply accepted it as part of the journey, not because they enjoyed it, because they understood something important. A failed attempt is rarely wasted. An unattempted life often is. That truth becomes clearer with age. Talk to people near the end of their lives. Many do not spend their final years haunted by failures. They are haunted by hesitation, by opportunities ignored, by risks avoided, by dreams postponed until there was no time left. The fear of failure convinced them to stay safe. But safety came with a price. A smaller life, a quieter life, a life that never fully discovered what it was capable of becoming. That is why avoiding failure can be more dangerous than failure itself. Failure may wound your confidence for a season. Avoidance slowly wounds your potential. Failure may close one door. Avoidance prevents you from approaching any door at all. Failure may leave scars. Avoidance leaves emptiness. And emptiness is often harder to heal. The truth is that nobody can promise success. Nobody can guarantee outcomes. Nobody can eliminate risk. That is not how life works. But there is something worse than failing. Reaching the end of a chapter and realizing you never gave yourself a chance. Never tested your abilities. Never explored your potential. Never discovered what was possible. Because you were too busy protecting yourself from failure. The irony is painful. And trying to avoid one kind of pain, people create another. A deeper pain. A quieter pain. A pain called regret. And regret has a way of asking questions that cannot be answered. Questions that echo through years. Questions that arrive in quiet moments. Questions that sound like this. What if I had tried? What if I had taken the chance? What if I had trusted myself? What if failure was never the thing I should have feared? Because perhaps the greatest failure is not falling short. Perhaps the greatest failure is never finding out how far you could have gone. And that is a lesson many people learn far too late. There are some teachers in life that we choose. We choose our books. We choose our mentors. We choose our courses. We choose the lessons we want to learn. Failure is different. Failure does not ask for permission. It arrives when it wants. It teaches what it wants. And it leaves only when the lesson is understood. That is why nobody wants it. Nobody wakes up hoping to fail. Nobody prays for disappointment. Nobody asks life for heartbreak, rejection, mistakes, or setbacks. Yet some of life's most important lessons arrive through those very experiences. Not because life is cruel, because some lessons cannot be learned any other way. You can read about patience. Failure teaches patience. You can hear people talk about humility. Failure teaches humility. You can listen to speeches about resilience. Failure teaches resilience. There is a difference between hearing a lesson and living one. Failure forces lessons to become real, and that is why its teachings last. Think about the people you respect most, not the people who simply succeeded, the people with wisdom, the people with depth, the people whose words carry weight. Very often, their wisdom was not born from comfort. It was born from setbacks, mistakes, losses, failures, because suffering has a way of stripping away illusions. It forces people to see life differently, to think differently, to grow differently. Failure is one of the few experiences that can completely change how a person sees themselves and the world around them. Not because it destroys them, because it reveals them. The person who succeeds easily may never understand their own weaknesses. The person who fails has no choice but to confront them. The person who succeeds quickly may never develop patience. The person who fails repeatedly often does. The person who never struggles may never appreciate progress. The person who has struggled values every step forward. Failure gives perspective, and perspective is priceless. One of the greatest misconceptions about failure is that it is the opposite of success. It isn't. Failure and success are often partners, not enemies. Success shows you what worked. Failure shows you what didn't. Success rewards. Failure informs. Success celebrates. Failure educates. The people who grow the most are not the people who never fail. They are the people who listen when failure speaks. Because failure is always speaking. After every setback, after every mistake, after every disappointment, failure asks a question. What will you do with this? Will you become bitter or wiser? Will you become defeated or stronger? Will you allow this moment to define you or develop you? The choice is always yours. Failure provides the lesson. You decide whether to learn it. That is what separates people. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck, the willingness to learn. Some people experience failure and become trapped in resentment. Others experience the same failure and become transformed by it. The difference is not the event. The difference is the response. Because failure is not a destination. It is a classroom. And classrooms are meant to be temporary. You are meant to learn, adapt, grow, then move forward. Not remain seated forever. That is why failure should never become your identity. You can fail without being a failure. Those are two completely different things. One describes an event. The other describes a person. And no event has the authority to define an entire person. Not one mistake. Not one rejection. Not one disappointment. Not one bad chapter. Your story is always bigger than a single moment. Always. The truth is that many of the things you know today came from mistakes you once wished had never happened. Lessons that seemed painful at the time. Lessons you would never choose. Yet lessons that made you wiser, stronger, more aware, more prepared. That is the strange gift hidden inside failure. The gift nobody notices until years later. The realization that the thing you hated most was teaching you something valuable. Something success alone could never have taught. And perhaps that is why failure remains one of life's greatest teachers. Not because it is pleasant, not because it is easy, but because it is honest. It tells the truth when applause disappears. It reveals reality when excuses stop working. It points toward growth when pride gets in the way. And although nobody wants that teacher, almost everyone needs it. Because the lessons learned through failure often become the foundation of future success. Not overnight, not immediately, but eventually. The irony is that people spend their lives chasing success, yet some of the most valuable parts of who they become are shaped by failure. The patience, the wisdom, the humility, the resilience, the perspective, the character. Those qualities are often forged in moments nobody would willingly choose. And that is why failure deserves a different reputation. Not admiration, not celebration, but respect. Respect for the lessons it teaches. Respect for the truths it reveals. Respect for the growth it makes possible. Because failure is many things: painful, uncomfortable, humbling, frustrating. But it is also something else. A teacher. The teacher nobody wants, yet often the teacher nobody forgets.